It was raining the night my parents disowned me. Not just a gentle drizzle, but the kind of storm that feels like the sky is grieving with you. I stood on their porch, soaked to the bone, clutching my 5-month-old twin daughters in my arms. My voice was hoarse from pleading. Please, just let us in, just for tonight. But my father's eyes were cold. My mother wouldn't even look at me. You chose disgrace, she said. Then the door closed. That was the moment I knew. I had no family left. I was a divorcee, a stain on their perfect image, and now just a girl in the storm with 2 babies and nowhere to go. But what I did after that, even they couldn't have imagined. And I promise you neither will you. The rain soaked through my coat, turning it heavy and useless. My arms trembled not just from the cold, but from the weight of Isla and Rory, their tiny bodies pressed against me, whimpering in confusion. Their cries were muffled, almost apologetic, as if they knew we didn't belong there anymore. I stood frozen on the porch, staring at the door that had just shut in my face, the same door I once ran through as a child, laughing, dragging mud across their polished hardwood floors. Now it was a wall. A barrier between who I used to be, the perfect daughter, the honor student, the church volunteer, and the woman I'd become in their eyes. Broken, tainted. I wanted to scream. I wanted to kick that damn door until my knuckles bled. But my babies needed calm. They needed safety. And I had neither. I looked around the quiet neighborhood. All the houses were dark, the only light coming from the flickering street lamp across the road. I had no care it was with Brandon, my ex. No wallet it was in the diaper bag I'd left inside the house, thinking I'd only be a minute. Just my phone in my coat pocket, dying at 7%. I scrolled through my contacts. Not many names felt safe anymore. Most were tied to Brandon's world, or my parents. I hesitated, then called Leah. We hadn't spoken in months. She was my college roommate now, a nurse in Tacoma. I didn't even know if she'd pick up. She did. Natalie? Her voice was groggy with sleep. Are you okay? No, I whispered, my teeth chattering. I'm outside my parents' house. They won't let me in. It's pouring. The girls are cold. I don't know where to go. There was a pause, then the sound of sheets rustling. Text me your location. I'll come get you. Give me an hour. I hung up and slid down the porch railing, curling myself around Isla and Rory, tucking their faces into my chest. I sang the soft lullaby my mother used to hum when I was sick, even though the sound of her voice now made me sick. I waited. In the storm. Shivering. Numb. And then, like a miracle, headlights cut through the dark. Leah's old Subaru came rolling down the block, splashing water across the curb. She jumped out with a blanket in her arms, her face full of disbelief and fury. Oh my God, Nat. She wrapped us up and led me to the car. I didn't say a word. But I felt something shift inside me. They had closed their door. But maybe that wasn't the only one in this world. Leah's apartment was small, barely 700 square feet, but that night, it felt like a palace. Warm air hit my face the moment we stepped in, and for the first time in hours, I could feel my fingers again. She helped me peel off the soaked coat and handed me a towel. Go sit, she said, already heating a kettle. I'll find something dry for the babies. I tried to say thank you, but my throat burned with exhaustion. Instead, I just nodded and dropped onto the worn gray couch, clutching Isla and Rory to my chest. They'd finally fallen asleep during the drive, but their cheeks were still cold, little foreheads damp from the storm. Leah returned with a couple of soft baby onesies she'd kept from her niece. They'll be too big, but it's something. I stared at her, wide-eyed. You kept baby clothes? She shrugged. Just in case someone needed them. I don't know if it was the kindness, the warmth, or the adrenaline crashing all at once, but I started crying. Not the silent, dignified tears I'd grown used to since the divorce. These were raw, heaving sobs like something had broken loose inside me. Leah sat next to me without a word. She didn't try to fix it. She just let me cry, then held the babies while I showered. I stood under the hot water, watching dirt and pain swirl down the drain. I felt hollow. Grateful, but hollow. When I stepped out, The apartment was quiet. Leah had set up a makeshift sleeping area on the living room floor cushions and a folded blanket for me, a laundry basket lined with towels for the girls. She handed me a mug of chamomile tea. "You don't have to talk now, just rest." I stared at the floor. "Leah, I don't know how long I'll need to stay." "You'll stay as long as you need. No one should be left outside in the rain. Especially not you." I nodded, biting my lip to keep more tears in. I felt like a ghost of myself, the confident, curious reporter who once ran into danger for the story. The wife who decorated a nursery in soft yellow and coral, dreaming of lullabies and first steps. Now I was just a girl with nothing, except 2 daughters, and a friend who still remembered me. That night, I lay on the floor listening to the soft breathing of my girls. My bones ached, my heart throbbed, but there was something new too. Not hope exactly, just stillness. A pause between what had been destroyed and what might come next. And sometimes, in the rubble of everything you lose, you start to see what might be built. Not a house, but a home. The first morning at Leah's, I woke up to the sound of Isla coughing softly. Sunlight filtered through the blinds in soft strips, warming the edge of the blanket on the floor. My back ached. My neck was stiff, but I was alive, and my daughters were warm. I sat up slowly and looked around. The diaper bag Leah had bought yesterday sat by the wall, stocked with essentials: formula, wipes, tiny diapers. It was more than I had when I'd left my parents' doorstep. Leah was already gone, her scrubs folded over a chair. A sticky note on the fridge read, "You've got this. I left coffee and oatmeal. Call me if you need anything." I wanted to believe her, but the truth was, I had no job, no money, no plan. Brandon had drained our joint account months ago and disappeared into his new, simpler life, as he called it, a 1-bedroom downtown with the intern he'd been sleeping with. My name was still on the lease, my credit was shot, and I had no energy to chase legal battles while juggling 2 infants on 4 hours of broken sleep. So I did what I could. I cleaned Leah's apartment, every corner, every plate. I cooked simple meals mostly out of guilt for occupying her space. I rocked Isla and Rory through the long nights, when teething or stomach gas made them scream for hours. I didn't sleep much. I didn't cry anymore either. I was too tired for that. I started writing again, not for work, not for anyone, just in a beat-up leather notebook Leah had found in a thrift store. I wrote about the porch, the rain, my mother's eyes like stone, the way Rory reached out in the dark, trusting that I'd still be there. And the truth was, I was still there, not whole, not strong, but standing. Each day bled into the next. I counted bottles, folded onesies, scrolled through job listings I had no mental space for. I avoided mirrors. I hated the way I looked. Eyes sunken, hair unwashed, a body that still hadn't returned from pregnancy. One evening, Leah came home to find me staring blankly at the TV, Isla asleep on my chest. "You need out," she said gently. "Not out of here, but out of this fog." I nodded, but I didn't move. Then she handed me a flyer. "Writing workshop for women, free, Saturdays, local library." "I thought of you," she said. "You used to be fire. Maybe the embers are still there." That night, after she went to bed, I sat alone with the flyer in my hands, turning it over and over. Something flickered inside me, no quite flame, but maybe a spark. Maybe the story I was living wasn't over yet. The library was just 3 blocks away. It took me almost a week to gather the courage to go. I stood outside its doors one Saturday morning, clutching the stroller with Isla and Rory bundled inside, both asleep. My heart thudded against my ribs like it didn't want to enter. I hadn't sat in a room of strangers since before the twins were born, before the divorce, before I became that girl, the one with too much baggage and no future. But Leah's voice echoed in my head. "You used to be fire." I stepped inside. The workshop was in a small community room in the back, 10 folding chairs in a circle, and a whiteboard that read, Your story matters. Let's begin. The instructor was a soft-spoken woman in her 50s named Joy. Her eyes crinkled when she smiled. She welcomed me without questions, motioned to a chair, and said, "You're exactly where you need to be." The session started with a simple prompt. Write about a moment that changed everything. My pen hovered over the page. And then I wrote. Fast. Raw. Messy. I wrote about the rain, the porch, the cold rejection. I wrote about Isla's shiver and Rory's tiny cry. About the silence that followed the slammed door. When I looked up, the room was silent. Joy had asked us to read our work aloud, and somehow, I heard myself say, "I'll go." My voice trembled at first, but I kept reading. No one interrupted. No one looked away. When I finished, there was a long pause, then someone whispered, "God, that was real." A woman across the circle, probably in her late 30s, shed tears in her eyes. "I've been through that too," she said. "Not the rain, but the door, the rejection." It hit me like a breath I hadn't taken in years. I wasn't alone. After the workshop, Joy pulled me aside. "You have something, Natalie," she said. "I don't just mean talent, I mean truth, and truth matters." I walked home in a daze, the twins babbling in their stroller. The city looked softer, or maybe I just did. That night, I reread my notebook. I saw it differently. It wasn't just pain anymore, it was story. Something bigger than me, something that could matter to someone else. So I opened Leah's old laptop and began typing it up. Slowly. A few pages a night, after the twins went down. I didn't know what I was writing exactly. But I knew why. Because I needed to remember that I survived. And someone else out there might need to remember that they can too. It started with a blog post. Leah convinced me to publish one of the chapters I'd written, just one. She helped me set up a free WordPress site and titled it, "Left in the Rain." I didn't expect anything from it. I thought maybe a handful of strangers would read it. Maybe a few polite comments. Maybe nothing at all. But within 24 hours, the post had over 2,000 views. By the end of the week, 18,000. It wasn't the numbers that shook me, it was the messages. My father did the same to me when I left my husband. I cried reading this. I was that girl on the porch once. I thought I was alone. Thank you. I read every comment with my hand over my mouth, stunned that something so personal could echo in the hearts of so many. A journalist from a small online women's magazine emailed me. "Would you be willing to share more of your story in an interview?" I hesitated. I didn't want to be a symbol. I didn't want pity. I just wanted to be heard. So I said yes. The article ran with the headline, "Left in the Rain, One Mother's Journey from Rejection to Resilience." It went viral. Suddenly, bigger outlets reached out. A podcast invited me to speak. A parenting forum pinned my story. A major Instagram page for single moms reposted my excerpt with the caption, "Read this, then hug the woman next to you, because no one should be left in the storm." The blog post was shared across Facebook, Twitter, Reddit, even LinkedIn. My inbox overflowed. A literary agent messaged, "Have you considered turning this into a book?" I stared at the screen, heart pounding. Me? A book? I told Leah, and she practically screamed, "Yes, Nat, that's what you've been doing all along." But something inside me still flinched. Would my parents see it? Would they retaliate? I asked Leah, "Am I doing something wrong by making this public?" She looked at me, calm and firm. "No, you're not exposing them. You're exposing the silence they left you in." And that felt true. So I started piecing the blog posts into chapters. I gave it shape. I gave it a name. Left in the Rain. Because that's where it began. But not where it would end. I signed the publishing contract on a Wednesday afternoon. The girls were napping in their playpen. Leah was at work. I was sitting on the edge of the couch, fingers trembling over the laptop mouse as I hovered over the accept button. The contract wasn't from a big New York house. But it was real. A small indie publisher, run by women, had read my manuscript and believed in it. I closed my eyes, took a breath, and clicked. Just like that, Left in the Rain was no longer just mine. In the weeks that followed, I worked with their editor on tightening the manuscript, choosing a cover, a black umbrella in a puddle, and writing the dedication. To the daughters born into storms may, you find your shelter within. The official announcement came out on the publisher's website and Instagram. It was shared widely. Again. I should have been elated. But deep down, I braced for it. And I was right. 2 days after the announcement, I received an envelope in the mail. No return address. But I knew that handwriting. I'd learned to read it perfectly growing up, from thank you cards to passive-aggressive birthday notes. My mother's. Inside was a 2-page letter. Neatly typed. Cold as marble. Natalie. Your decision to make our family affairs public is disgraceful. You have shamed us in front of our church, our neighbors, and our community. If this book is not retracted immediately, we will be forced to take legal action. No warmth, no apology, just fury dressed up as decorum. My hands shook as I read. I dropped the letter onto the kitchen counter and stood in silence, the hum of the refrigerator the only sound in the room. When Leah got home, she read it too, her jaw clenched. You knew this could happen, right? I nodded. But I didn't expect it to hurt this much. A few days later, a formal legal notice followed, this time from an actual attorney representing my parents. A cease and desist letter accusing me of defamation, slander, and emotional harm caused by misrepresentation. I laughed. A sharp, bitter sound. They left me outside in the rain with 2 babies, I muttered. And I'm the one causing emotional harm? The publisher called and offered legal support. They'd seen this happen before, women writing memoirs about surviving religious, patriarchal, or toxic family systems. There was a whole legal department dedicated to truth defense. We gathered everything. Text messages, emails, photos from that night taken by Leah, documenting how I arrived, soaked, shivering, clutching my daughters. And I still had the voice memo I'd recorded the next morning when I called my mother and asked, why? She'd said, flatly, we can't be associated with failure. That's not who we are. That recording would soon be played in court. The lawsuit became public. A local journalist covering women's issues picked it up. The headline read, Parents sue daughter for telling the truth about being left in the rain. It spread like wildfire, not just because of the drama but because it struck a nerve. Thousands of people, especially women, began sharing their own stories. Hashtags like Left in the Rain and Not Your Shame started trending. Book pre-orders skyrocketed. And my parents? They tried to lay low, but the damage was done. People in their church began asking questions. Their neighbors whispered behind hedges. The more they tried to silence me, the louder the story became. In court, their lawyer argued that I had defamed them, cost them social standing, and painted them as cruel. Our defense? The truth. The judge listened to everything. The voice memo. The letter. The blog post. Leah's testimony. And the photo of me on that porch, drenched, pale, holding Isla and Rory like shields against the world. The verdict came swift and strong. This book is not defamatory. It is protected speech, rooted in lived experience. Case dismissed. When the gavel fell, I didn't cheer. I didn't cry. I just turned to Leah and whispered, I can finally exhale. My parents didn't look at me once. But I looked at them, and I saw exactly what they were now. People who cared more about perception than love, about control than compassion, about silence than truth. And I would no longer carry their shame. The courtroom emptied quickly after the verdict, but the silence it left behind stayed with me. I stood in the hallway outside, holding Isla's stuffed bunny in one hand, the court document in the other. My legs felt like sand. My breath came shallow. I just won a legal battle against my own parents, but it didn't feel like victory. It felt like a funeral. Not for them. For the version of me who still hoped they'd change. Leah touched my shoulder gently. You okay? I nodded. Just tired. In the bones. That night, back at the apartment, I tucked the girls into bed and sat by the window, staring out at the Portland rain, gentler now, like a quiet exhale. The internet, however, was anything but quiet. The news of the court case lit up social media again. Only this time, people weren't just sharing my story, they were telling their own. Women, men, adult children, survivors, estranged daughters, gay sons, abused spouses, people who'd been gaslit, cast out, erased because they didn't fit the script their families had written for them. One comment hit me like a lightning bolt. Her parents didn't just sue her, they sued their own reflection because they hated what it revealed. I reread it 3 times. That was it, wasn't it? They didn't hate me. They hated that my truth made them visible to the world in a way they couldn't control. The next morning, I got a message request on Facebook from a name I hadn't seen in years. Aunt Clara. She'd always been the quiet sister, the one who stayed on the sidelines during family gatherings. I braced myself as I opened the message. Natalie, I read your book. I believe every word. What they did to you was cruel. I'm sorry I didn't speak up back then. I'm proud of you now. My eyes blurred. More messages followed. Former neighbors, old classmates, even a Sunday school teacher. Not all supportive, but enough to know I wasn't just shouting into the void anymore. But the most surprising moment came when Leah and I walked the twins through the park a few days later. A woman in her 50s approached us hesitantly, holding a copy of Left in the Rain in her hands. Are you her? She asked, eyes glassy. I nodded slowly. I am. She looked at me like people look at survivors of fires or floods, like someone who lived to tell the tale. My daughter left an abusive marriage last year, she said. I told her she was embarrassing the family. But after reading your book, I called her. I apologized. Thank you. She hugged me. A stranger. But not really. Because that's what truth does, it ripples. And sometimes the people it reaches aren't the ones you wrote it for. A few months after the court case, we moved. It wasn't far, just across the river, to a modest 2-bedroom bungalow with peeling white paint and a crooked mailbox. But it was ours. The first space that belonged solely to me and the girls. No shared walls. No ghosts in the hallway. Leah helped me move in. She cried when she saw the nursery I'd painted soft lavender with hand-drawn clouds across the ceiling. You did this by yourself? She asked. I smiled. No, I did it with myself. We hung up art the girls had finger-painted, planted daisies in the tiny front yard, built bookshelves from scratch. One wall of the living room held framed copies of both editions of Left in the Rain, self-published and reissued. Another held photos of Isla and Rory in every stage of babyhood. Laughing, growing, thriving. And next to those, a photo of me. No makeup, wind in my hair, holding both girls in a field of sunflowers. The caption, not perfect, just free. I released a second book 6 months later. It was called The Quiet Revolution, Letters from the Porch. Less memoir, more reflection. Notes on rebuilding, on loneliness, on power that doesn't look like shouting. It reached women's book clubs, therapists' waiting rooms, high school guidance counselors. Not viral, not flashy, just steadily needed. I turned down most interviews now. Not out of fear, but because the story had done what it needed to. I didn't need a spotlight. I just needed a life. And I had one. Mornings were slow, cereal, cartoons, sticky fingers pulling at my shirt. Afternoons were library visits, garden hose play, and the never-ending ritual of, no, Rory, crayons are not food. Nights were quiet. I'd sit on the porch with tea, listening to the wind. Sometimes rain would fall again, tapping the roof gently, but this time, it didn't feel like judgment. It felt like memory. A story I had lived through and walked out of. One evening, Isla looked up at me and asked, Mommy, where do rainbows come from? I kissed her forehead and whispered, from storms that didn't win. And I knew, with every breath, we weren't just survivors. We were home.